Namaste, my dear brothers and sisters. Uh, I'm Ramesh Bijlani. I live and work at the Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch. And we have here these days a guest, Aditi Kaul, who is a highly qualified psychologist. She has a PhD in psychology, although she considers herself to be a perpetual student. But she has also started teaching psychology at the Oro University in Surat. So we'll be having a discussion, and I'm sure by the end of the discussion, I would have learned more than she has.
Yes, I have a lot of questions for you, and I think we can begin with how do you see the process and how does one become aware of the different parts of the being? And just the process of getting to know that we are so much more than what is just on the surface. So, how do you take and what is your take on that?
Yes, I can see I'm a person well versed in not only psychology but also spirituality. What you have in mind is that how do we become aware of not just the body and the mind, which of course are quite obvious, but also with what is deeper and in fact behind them, and that is the soul. It is because of the soul that the body and the mind exist. So, how does one become aware of that deeper self? Because the body and the mind, everybody can understand and relate to. Probably the simplest way one can bring it out is through an example. Suppose there is a building on fire, and in front of that building is a fireman, and he's told that there are a few people probably trapped inside the building. So at once he gets an impulse, let me enter the building and rescue these people. But before he does that, he starts thinking, maybe it will be very hot and suffocating inside. And then he says to himself, it will also be very risky. Suppose in the process my family, suppose in the process I die, then what will happen to my family? Now, this voice that spoke to him that it will be very hot and suffocating inside came from the emotional part of his being, which is one aspect of the mind, a very powerful aspect of the mind. Then, this reason that it will be very risky and what will happen to my family if I die, this came from the thinking part of the mind or the intellect. So the thinking part of the mind justified what he was feeling like doing because it wasn't going to be an unpleasant experience. It was going to be hot and suffocating. But then how about that initial impulse that he got? Let me enter the building and rescue these people. That quick response and the ideal response came from the soul. Now let's look at the consequences of these two alternatives. Suppose he listens to the emotional part of the being and the intellect, which are now united to speak in one voice, don't enter. Suppose he doesn't do it. And then later on it is discovered that some people died inside the bed. He feels very bad. He feels guilty. And the uneasiness that he gets becomes recurrent. It might keep coming up from time to time. It might even follow him to his deathbed. That day such and such event happened and I knew what was the right thing to do. I even thought of it, but then actually I didn't pick up the courage to do it. No, he keeps thinking about it off and on, and maybe it will follow him to his deathbed. On the other hand, suppose he listens to that initial impulse and just rushes in. Irrespective of the consequences, whether or not he is able to rescue anybody, he'll feel good. And even more important than feeling good, he'll have lasting mental peace. I did the best. Now, what we have seen is that we can become aware of this deepest self if we try and look at the choices that we make and how we make them. It's just that we remain a little oblivious to the voice of the soul because that's a rather shy and faint voice. It's quite content to be ignored. It does not insist. On the other hand, the voices of the emotional part of the being and the intellect are very noisy. And the emotions can be so compelling that even if they are guiding us towards not the best choice, we end up listening to that voice, and the intellect collaborates and cooperates with the emotional part of the being and justifies it through a few reasons. So through this analysis, we see that it is not really so difficult to bring out uh, the different parts of the being. The body, of course, is obvious. The mind is also not really difficult to relate to. Both aspects of the mind, the feeling and the thinking part, and the soul.
But then, like as you said, no, that those voices make a lot of noise. The soul is a very shy and silent. But the thing is that, as we in the famous head and heart debate we keep talking about, so in this case we're talking about mind and emotions. How do we reconcile that mind says something, emotion says something, and then when they get stabilized, then that shy voice can come out. So what is that process of that unification? How can one say take the first step to go about the process?
The one way to do it, at least, is to listen to the voice of the soul more frequently, and also to introspect what the consequences of listening to it or ignoring it are. As we saw in that example of the fireman, if he goes through that introspective process, in either case, he would get some experience. That what the consequences become a part of his experience. Suppose he entered the building, he feels good, and he gets lasting mental peace. Not only he feels good, this feeling good is a sense of joy which surpasses ordinary happiness or fleeting pleasures. Happiness can be of two types: the happiness of getting something, like say getting a new dress or getting a new car or a new phone, and of course one can get abstract things also, like appreciation and encouragement. So all these bring us happiness, but that is the happiness of getting something. But there's also a joy of giving, helping somebody. Now, the joy of giving always feels better than the happiness of getting something. And not only that, the joy of giving is always in our own hands, getting is not. Because we can always love somebody, we can't compel somebody to love us. So, if the person introspects on the consequences of listening to this inner voice, which told him to enter the burning building, he will find that I got immense joy, which the quality of which was far better than that of ordinary happiness. It is the type of happiness which is in my own hands, and it is associated with lasting mental peace in contrast with recurrent uneasiness. And therefore, what will happen is that it becomes a part of his experience. And basically, learning is learning results from experience. That's a very basic definition of learning. Change in behavior as a result of experience. On the other hand, suppose he did not enter the burning building. He feels guilty, he gets recurrent uneasiness. That also becomes a part of his experience when he introspects. So if he keeps analyzing these experiences in this way, gradually what happens is that the emotional part of the being itself starts making the same type of choices as the soul. Because now the emotional part of the being has realized that I can get a superior version of happiness, which is always in my own hands, associated with lasting mental peace, and avoid the punishment of feeling guilty and recurrent uneasiness if I make this particular category of choices. And that category of choices in the emotional part of the being can see, because it is not really totally divorced from the soul. It's a manifestation of the soul. So it may not be perfect, but it can move towards perfection. So as a result of these experiences and introspection, the emotional part of the being gradually starts undergoing a transformation. And now this person's emotions start speaking in a voice similar to the soul. Because after all, what are the emotions looking for? The emotional part of the being is looking for happiness. So when it has found a way of getting the best version of happiness, which is always in our own hands, associated with lasting mental peace, then naturally it will go in for that, unless there's a compelling reason to do otherwise. And the intellect, or the thinking part of the being, that easily falls in place, because that it is a very versatile part of the being. It can justify doing something, it can justify not doing something. So the emotional part of the being, if it speaks in the genuine voice of the soul, the intellect quickly finds reasons to justify it. So the emotions, the intellect, and the soul are speaking in the same voice, the emotional part of the being and intellect, that is the mind, is no longer an adversary, it becomes a collaborator of the soul. And the body, the poor body, is a docile instrument, it just does what the mind tells it to do. So that is what the unification of the being is. So at least during that act, when the person is acting on the voice of the soul, the emotional part of the being, the intellect and the soul have come together. They have unified. But this unification may not last. It may not be achieved whenever there is such an opportunity. But then gradually the unification of the emotional part of the being and the intellect is happening. It's a progressive process. And the more it happens, actually the easier it happens to do it the next time. That's also there, because then it becomes, it's strengthened. And the person's sort of, the learning from this experience becomes better. In other words, one can say that this repeated experiences which lead to learning train the emotions and the intellect. They get trained to speak in the same language as the soul. And the culmination of this would be a total unification when these parts of the being, the superficial parts of the being, always speak in the same language as the soul. And one can organize one's life around this unified being. But the total unification is a long journey, and most of us will probably not complete it in a lifetime. But that is not what really is important. What is important is to realize that this journey itself is enjoyable, because every step that we take towards the goal, towards the final culmination of this journey, every step that we take in that direction brings us some of the things that we are all looking for: joy, lasting mental peace, absence of guilt and recurrent uneasiness, a sense of control because this happiness is always in our own hands, good health because of the mind-body connection, and a sense of fulfillment. Let me spend a couple of minutes on this fulfillment.
Sure.
Fulfillment, is a feeling that I don't need anything because I have everything. Now, this fulfillment comes through this process of transformation. Not by getting what we are usually looking for, in terms of ordinary worldly ambitions. And this again is something which is very difficult for a young person to understand, and therefore it is important that a young person satisfies these ambitions, fulfills some of the ordinary desires, because then it becomes a part of the person's experience, and then he knows that this is not just theoretical knowledge, it is real. My own experience has verified it. That is important. But at the same time, we can also get a cue from some people who have achieved everything in the world and yet did not find fulfillment till they turned in this direction. One example which I can give you is that of Mani Bhaumik. Mani Bhaumik is a physicist. He was born in India and went through a very difficult childhood, but being very intelligent, somehow managed to do a PhD from IIT Kharagpur probably, and then he got a postdoctoral fellowship for going to the US. In the US, he got involved in research on laser, and laser found application in so many fields, including medicine. The result was that it brought him a lot of royalties, and he grew so rich that he was not only highly decorated and received all sorts of awards, he became so rich as to have a large number of houses, big bungalows in California. And California being close to Hollywood, he developed a close friendship with many film stars and also many politicians, top politicians. He had pictures with the Nobel laureates and the presidents of the US and so on and so forth. So, I mean, this person had achieved immense wealth, name and fame, high contacts, just about everything that a person ordinarily thinks will bring in happiness. And if you ask a young person, what do you want? The person will not even ask for so much. He'll say that, well, if I get this much, then I think I'll need nothing more. True. Much less than what Mani Bhaumik had achieved. But then one day what happened, after one party, which was over at his house, he was often spending a lot of time just entertaining guests and attending parties. That we reached that stage. So one day after one such party at his home, after all the guests had gone, he found that there was a visiting card on the floor. So he picked it up. It had the name of a celebrity. After having a quick look at it, suddenly something crossed his mind. He threw the card down and he said, "Is this what life is all about?" And then he realized that why he was still not having that sense of fulfillment. And then he says that it was an uneasy feeling which comes from being simultaneously overfed and starved. Overfed with material comforts and progress, and underfed at the spiritual level. And that was a turning point in his life. And then after that, what he did is what brought him fulfillment. And basically what he did was started listening to the voice of the soul. And what does the voice of the soul tell us? It tells us basically to love others. It inspires love, because at the level of the soul, we are all one. So one way of looking at everything that the soul tells us to do is to have a sense of oneness with others. For example, when the soul of this fireman told him to enter and rescue those people, it was because of a sense of oneness with those people, and that oneness inspires love, and that love would motivate him to enter the building. So that is the type of choices the soul gives us. So basically what it leads to is giving. Giving may be in the form of wealth, as Mani Bhavik could do, but giving could also be in the form of giving knowledge, or taking a risk voluntarily, knowing that it is risky. All these are different forms of giving. So it gives us the choices which involve loving, and love is expressed by giving. So that is the type of choices the soul gives us. So it is this type of choices which originate in love, which give us a sense of fulfillment. So that is what ultimately a person realizes after achieving everything that anybody can ask for. And those who do not understand this, they feel that if I have everything, why is it that I still am not satisfied? They can't put their finger at the right point, and they go into a depression. And that is why you find that so many celebrities, and these days we have so many of them, because many young people are now making a lot of money as sports persons, beauty queens, and so on and so forth. Many of them can't make out why is it that after achieving so much, I'm still unhappy, I'm not still contented, and then they go into a depression. So therefore, understanding this is very important for everybody, even before one has achieved all that. But at the same time, trying to achieve these things is not a sin. But then it will put it in the proper perspective. It will reduce the intensity. One will not try to achieve those ambitions the wrong way. And one would know that, yes, I want to experience it, but I also know that ultimately this is not what will bring me fulfillment.
I think one thing which I've understood is that the whole idea of the more you achieve that sense of oneness with the soul, you feel the oneness with the world, and that oneness will give us fulfillment.
Exactly.
Right. So just one in like bringing it all together, you said that it's a progressive process. Step by step, we get into it, and it's not that every time our emotions will be able to align with the soul. So can you just tell us very quickly in a way that how to not become very self-judgmental or self-critical when we are not able to do this? Because we recognize that yes, we are on the path, we are working towards it, and we are attempting to hear the soul's voice, but sometimes we miss it. So how to handle that miss and still continue on the path? So that can just give us a perspective.
Yes, that's again a good question, and difficult to achieve in practice. This sense of uneasiness that I knew what the right thing to do was, but somehow I didn't do it, can really be haunting. But then the principle in spirituality is not to go on a guilt trip, not to continue with this self-flagellation. One acknowledges one's weakness and then makes a resolution, next time I'll do better. And since our basic instruments, that is the body and the mind, around which our life ordinarily revolves, they have their limitations. We also turn to a higher power for divine grace, and we try to sort of hand over our selves, including our weaknesses, to that higher power, because we realize that for us it's difficult to process all those weaknesses. But at the same time, while that has a place, it is also a reality. Grace is not something just theoretical to make us feel good. But at the same time, it should not become an excuse for doing nothing. So uh, it's only when we walk part of the path that the divine also fulfills the other bit, and through that grace we are able to progress on the path. So the progress has to be sort of left to the divine. We keep doing our bit. When we make a mistake, we resolve to not to make it again, and then continue. One doesn't have to perpetually stay in that sense of with that sense of guilt, and also with that perpetual feeling it is beyond me, I'll never be able to do it, I can't do it, and so on. That is sort of a mode of self-flagellation, being too self-critical, is not the proper thing to do on the spiritual path.
I think that can be one of the takeaway, that effort and grace come together for the transformation to happen. I think that will be good to do. Thank you so much. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you.
Thank you.